Earth sent a broken dreadnought. The galaxy watched it become a monster. Part 1. The meeting room on Concord Station was cold, round, and full of eyes that did not want to look at the human woman sitting at the small table near the back wall. Captain Elena Voss did not mind. She had spent enough years in rooms where nobody wanted to look at her. She just kept her hands folded and waited for her name to be called. The interstellar Concord had built this station many centuries before humanity had even left its home star. It was a place where hundreds of different species came to argue, trade, and sometimes beg for help. Today, the room was full of tall, blue-skinned Threll diplomats in silver robes, short, round Osec traders clicking their mandibles nervously, and one very old Vantu elder who never seemed to blink. At the head of the table sat the Concord speaker, a tall, insect-like being named Director Kesh, whose 4 eyes moved independently, watching everyone at once. The Austrian sector, Director Kesh said, his voice coming out flat and translated through a small device on his chest, is under threat. Again. A large holographic map appeared above the table. It showed a cluster of stars near the edge of Concord space. Red lines crawled across it like veins, showing the path of Skarn raiders. The Skarn Empire had been eating its way through the outer rim for almost 30 years. They did not ask for surrender. They did not offer trade deals. They simply arrived with warships, took what they wanted, and burned what they could not take. 3 small member worlds of the Concord had already gone dark in the last 2 years. Austrian sector was next on their list, and everyone in the room knew it. We need ships, Director Kesh continued. Every member species has been asked to contribute a warship to the Joint Defense Fleet. This is not optional. This is treaty law. One by one, representatives stood and announced what they would send. The Threll offered 2 of their sleek silver cruisers, fast and heavily shielded. The Osec offered a squadron of small but clever gunships. The Vantu, who rarely fought but had deep pockets, offered to fund repairs and supplies for whoever needed them. Then it was Elena's turn. She stood slowly. She was not tall like the Threll. She was not covered in natural armor like the Osec. She was just a woman, in a plain gray Earthfleet uniform, and she felt every alien eye turn toward her at once. Humanity had only joined the Concord 6 years earlier. Most species in this room still were not sure what to think of Earth. Some thought humans were clever. Most thought humans were simply new, small, and not very useful yet. Earth will send a ship, Elena said. A Threll diplomat named Ambassador Solen raised a thin blue hand. Which ship, Captain? Your fleet has told us your best vessels are needed for your own border patrols. What is left for Ostrand? Elena kept her face calm, though her stomach twisted a little. The UNS Grendel, she said. There was a pause. Then, quietly, a few of the Threll actually laughed. It was a polite laugh, the kind meant to sound accidental, but everyone heard it anyway. Ambassador Solen tilted her head. Forgive me, Captain. Is that not the Dreadnought that was damaged in the Titan Belt accident? The one still sitting in dry dock? It was in dry dock, Elena said. It is being made spaceworthy. It will be ready in time. Spaceworthy is not the same as battle-ready, Solen said. Not unkindly, but with the tone of someone explaining something simple to a child. We have all seen the reports. Half of its reactor cores are offline. Its main weapon array was torn apart. I do not say this to insult your people, Captain Voss. I say this because lives in Ostrand depend on real strength, not symbols. Elena did not flinch. The Grendel will be there. That is Earth's contribution. If the Concord does not want it, the Concord can say so in writing, and Earth will send nothing at all. The room went quiet again. Director Kesh's 4 eyes settled on her for a long moment, and then he made a small clicking sound that his translator turned into words. The Concord accepts Earth's contribution. The Grendel will report to Ostrand sector within 4 weeks. The meeting moved on to other matters, but Elena barely heard any of it. She was thinking about the ship sitting in the dark, half broken, waiting for her. The UNS Grendel had once been the pride of Earth's outer fleet. She was a dreadnought, one of the biggest warships humanity had ever built, nearly 2 kilometers long, shaped like a long gray blade with heavy plating and rows of weapon turrets down her sides. She had been built during the tense years after first contact, when Earth still did not know if the galaxy was friendly or not. She had been meant to be a message. Humanity could build something big, something strong, something that could not be ignored. Then, 8 months ago, during a training exercise near the Titan asteroid belt, something had gone very wrong. A reactor containment field had failed during a live fire drill. The explosion had torn a hole through 6 decks, killed 11 crew members, and left half the ship's systems dead. The official report called it a tragic accident caused by a faulty part. Earth Fleet Command had quietly decided the Grendel was not worth the cost of a full rebuild. There were newer ships coming. The Grendel was old news, a broken hulk taking up space in dry dock. Elena had been the Grendel's executive officer during the accident. She had pulled 6 crew members out of the burning wreckage with her own hands, before the fire suppression systems finally kicked in. She had also watched 5 others die because the systems had not kicked in fast enough. Since then, she had fought Fleet Command for 8 months, filing report after report, arguing that the Grendel could still fly, could still fight, if someone would just give her the chance to prove it. When the Concorde's request came in, needing a ship nobody else wanted to spare, Fleet Command had finally said yes. Not because they believed in the Grendel, because it was the cheapest way to satisfy a treaty obligation. Send the broken ship. If it worked, fine. If it did not come back, nobody important would miss it. Elena did not care about their reasons. She only cared that she was getting her ship back. 4 weeks later, Elena stood on the Grendel's bridge for the first time since the accident. The lights flickered. Half the display panels were dark, patched over with temporary wiring that ran across the floor like tangled roots. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal, no matter how many times the cleaning crews had scrubbed it. Reactor 2 is still offline, said Chief Engineer Marcus Reyes, a broad-shouldered man with grease permanently stained into the lines of his hands. Reactor 3 is running at 60%, and honestly, Captain, I don't trust it past 70. Main weapon array is down to 11 working turrets out of 32. Point defense grid has holes you could fly a shuttle through. And don't get me started on the hull. We patched the worst of it, but there are sections back on decks 9 through 14 that are basically held together with hope and welding tape. Can she fly? Elena asked. She can fly, Reyes said. Whether she can fight is a different question. We're about to find out, Elena said. The crew that had signed on for this mission was small, only 210 people, where the Grendel was designed to carry closer to 800. Most were young, fresh out of the academy, people nobody else wanted on their ships either. A few were older veterans who had asked to come specifically because they remembered the accident and wanted a chance to finish what the Grendel had started. There was Lieutenant Priya Nair, the tactical officer, sharp-eyed and quiet, who had graduated top of her class but had been passed over for better postings because she came from a farming colony with no political connections. There was Ensign Tomas Illich, barely 22, running communications, who had begged his way onto the crew roster 3 separate times before someone finally said yes. There was Dr. Amara Ose, the ship's chief medic, who had been on the Grendel during the accident and had never left the fleet since, determined that the next time something went wrong, she would be ready. And there was Aria, the ship's artificial intelligence, badly damaged in the accident, her processing cores scattered and rebuilt from spare parts scavenged from 3 other decommissioned ships. Aria spoke a little slower than she used to, and sometimes her voice glitched on certain words, but she was still there, still watching over every system on the ship like a tired guardian. Captain, Aria said through the bridge speakers, her voice carrying a faint static crackle. Long-range diagnostics complete. I can confirm Chief Reyes's assessment. We are, in simple terms, a mess. A few of the younger crew members laughed nervously. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Noted, Aria, she said. Let's take her out anyway. The trip to Ostran's sector took 3 weeks through hyperspace lanes that other Concorde ships had already mapped and secured. The Grendel limped along at a fraction of her old top speed, her damaged hyperdrive unable to hold a stable jump for longer than a few hours at a time. Every jump meant dropping back into normal space, checking systems, patching new leaks, and jumping again. It was slow, exhausting work, and Elena spent most of those 3 weeks walking the decks herself, talking to her crew, learning the ship's new rhythms and new wounds. She found Reyes in the depths of Reactor 3's control room on the 5th day, his hands buried in an open panel, muttering quietly to himself. Talk to me, Elena said. She's stubborn, Reyes said, not looking up. Like an old dog that won't stop trying to run, even with 3 legs. I keep finding little surprises. Half the wiring back here isn't even original fleet spec anymore. Somebody spliced in parts from at least 4 different ship classes, just trying to keep her alive during repairs. Is that bad? Reyes finally looked up, and there was something almost like affection in his tired eyes. Actually, Captain, it might not be. See, when a ship is built clean, all one design, an enemy who studies that design knows exactly how she'll behave, knows her weak points, her firing patterns, her power curves. But this? He gestured at the tangled mess of wiring and jury-rigged parts around him. This ship doesn't behave like anything in any manual. Her power readings jump around because 3 different reactor types are feeding the grid at different rates. Her weapon systems fire at odd intervals because half the turrets are running on backup power routed through systems they were never meant to use. If somebody scans us trying to figure out our patterns, Captain, I don't think they're going to find any. Elena considered that. So she's unpredictable. She's a mess, Reyes said again, but he was smiling now. But maybe a mess nobody can read. They arrived at Ostran sector on a gray morning, ship time, 3 weeks and 2 days after leaving Concord Station. The sector's defense fleet was already gathered near the edge of the system, a collection of ships from a dozen different species, sleek and shining, next to the scarred gray hull of the Grendel as she limped into formation. The reaction was immediate and exactly what Elena had expected. "Captain Voss," came a voice over the comm, translated smoothly, belonging to a Threll fleet commander named Vice Admiral Corin. "We were told Earth was sending a Dreadnought." "You're looking at her," Elena said. There was a pause. On the bridge view screen, Elena could see the Threll flagship, a beautiful silver vessel bristling with fresh weapon arrays, her hull unmarked and gleaming. Next to it, the Grendel looked exactly like what she was, a wounded animal that had crawled a long way just to show up. "I see," Corin said, and there was no laughter in his voice this time, only a kind of tired disappointment. "Very well, Captain. We appreciate Earth's effort. I will assign you to rearguard duty, away from the main defense line. Perhaps your engineers can continue repairs while stationed there." "Understood, Admiral," Elena said, keeping her voice level. The channel closed. On the bridge, Lieutenant Nair glanced over at Elena, her jaw tight. "Rearguard, Captain. They think we're useless." "They think what the reports told them to think," Elena said. "That's fine. Let them. You're not angry?" Elena looked out at the stars, at the collection of proud, polished ships gathered in front of them. Ships that had never lost a war, never buried 11 crew members in a training accident, never spent 8 months fighting just to be allowed to try again. "I've been angry for 8 months, she said quietly. "Right now, I'm just tired of people deciding what my ship can do before they've ever seen her fight." She turned to Ensign Illich at communications. "Send our position to the sector defense grid. Let them know the Grendel is on station." "Aye, Captain," Illich said. Outside, the Grendel drifted into her assigned position at the rear of the formation, half in shadow, her scarred hull barely visible against the dark. Nobody watching that day would have guessed what she was about to become. To every eye in that sector, human and alien alike, she looked exactly like what the reports said, broken, tired, and small. None of them yet understood what a ship like that could do once something finally came looking for a fight. 3 days later, something did. The alarm woke Elena at 0300 ship time, a low pulsing tone that meant sensor contact. She was on the bridge in under 2 minutes, still pulling her jacket on, hair loose around her shoulders. "Report," she said. Lieutenant Nair was already at her station, eyes locked on her display. "3 unknown contacts, Captain. They dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the sector, near the mining colony at Ostran 4. Sensor profile matches known Skarn Scout Raider configuration. Small, fast, lightly armed but heavily shielded." "Just scouts then," Elena said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders, testing the defense line. "That's the assessment from the Threll flagship too," Nair said. "Admiral Corin is dispatching 2 cruisers to intercept." Elena watched the tactical display. Ostran 4 was a small mining colony, maybe 4,000 people, mostly OSIC workers pulling rare minerals out of the planet's crust to sell to the Concord. It sat almost directly between the main defense fleet and the Grendel's rear guard position. If the Skarn scouts came in on the angle they were currently tracking, they would pass close to the Grendel's patrol zone before the Threll cruisers could reach them. "Arya," Elena said. "Time to intercept for the Threll cruisers?" 14 minutes, Captain," Arya replied. "The Skarn contacts will reach effective rating range of Ostrand 4 in approximately 6 minutes, if they hold current course and speed." Elena did the math in her head. 8 minutes, where the colony would be undefended, unless someone closer moved to cover it. She looked at the tactical map again. The Grendel's rearguard position put her almost 2 minutes closer than anyone else in the fleet. "Helm, plot an intercept course to Ostrand 4, Elena said. "Best speed the engines can give us." "Captain," Nair said carefully, "our best speed is not very fast. And Admiral Corrin assigned us to hold position." "Admiral Corrin isn't going to get there in time," Elena said. "We are. Helm, go." The young helmsman, a nervous 19-year-old named Petty Officer Cole, hesitated only a second before his hands moved across the controls. The Grendel groaned, her damaged engines straining, but she turned, slow and heavy, toward the mining colony. "Alert Chief Reyes," Elena said. "Tell him we may need everything he's got, and probably more than that." Down in engineering, Marcus Reyes heard the order, and felt his stomach drop. "Everything I've got," he repeated to himself, staring at the reactor readouts. Reactor 3 was already running warm from the strain of the jump earlier that week. Pushing the engines for a full-speed intercept was going to demand more power than the ship's patched-together systems were really built to handle. "You heard the captain," he shouted to his small engineering crew. "I want manual overrides on every power junction between here and the engines. If something starts to overheat, I want a human hand on it in under 10 seconds, not a computer alert 3 minutes too late." His crew scattered to their stations. Reyes wiped his hands on his jumpsuit and pulled up the reactor controls himself, watching the numbers climb. "Come on, old girl," he muttered. "Just a little further." On the bridge, the tactical display showed the Grendel closing the distance, slow but steady. The 3 Skarn scout ships were now visible on long-range sensors, sleek black vessels with sharp angular hulls, moving in a loose formation toward the mining colony. "They've noticed us," Nair said, adjusting course. "Looks like they're not retreating, Captain. They're changing formation to engage." Elena frowned. That was unusual. Scout ships, by definition, were not meant to fight. They were meant to gather information and run. If these 3 were choosing to fight instead of flee, it meant one of 2 things. Either they were more heavily armed than standard Skarn scouts, or their commander had decided that one broken, slow-moving Earth dreadnought was too easy a target to pass up. "They think we're weak," Elena said quietly. "Good." "Captain," Nair looked up, confused. "Nair, I want you to think about what those ships are seeing right now," Elena said, walking closer to the tactical display. "They're seeing a big, slow hull, with a scarred outer plating, and a sensor signature that reads like nothing they've ever fought before. Chief Reyes tells me our weapon systems fire on power routed through 3 different reactor types, with different rise times. That means when we open fire, our shots aren't going to come out in the neat, even patterns any targeting computer in the galaxy is built to predict." Understanding started to dawn on Nair's face. "They won't be able to read us." "They won't be able to read us," Elena agreed. "Let's see what they do with that." The 3 Skarn scout ships closed to firing range 12 minutes later. Elena stood at the center of the bridge, watching the enemy formation split into an attack pattern. 2 ships moving to flank, while the 3rd held center. Exactly the kind of textbook maneuver a scout squadron would use against a slow, predictable target. "They're targeting our main hull, center mass," Nair reported. "Standard tactic against big ships. Overwhelm the shields in one spot. Punch through." "Let them," Elena said. "Divert all forward shield power to that section. Let it look like we're panicking to reinforce it. Captain, if we divert everything forward, our flanks will be nearly unshielded." "I know," Elena said. "That's the point. Arya, how are our patched weapon systems distributed around the hull?" "Unevenly, Captain," Arya answered. 11 functioning turrets, but they are spread across the ship in a pattern that does not match any standard Earth fleet weapon distribution diagram, due to battle damage and repair priorities. 4 turrets remain active along the port flank, 3 along starboard, 2 dorsal, 2 ventral. So if they flank us, expecting weak defenses on the sides. They will find defenses in places their scans do not expect, Arya finished. Elena allowed herself a small, tight smile. Let's give them a surprise. The Skarn opened fire first, their weapons lancing out in tight red beams, aimed exactly where Nair had predicted, straight at the reinforced center mass shields. The Grendel shuddered under the impact, alarms blaring across the bridge as the forward shields flared bright, absorbing hit after hit. Shields holding at 61%, Nair called out. They're focusing everything on the front. Let them keep focusing, Elena said. Wait for the flanking ships to commit. The two Skarn scouts on the flanks banked hard, curving around toward what their scans told them were the Grendel's weakest, least defended sides, exactly as Skarn tactical doctrine trained them to do against a wounded target. It was a good plan. It would have worked against almost any other ship in the galaxy. Now, Elena said, bring the flank turrets online. Fire at will. The port and starboard turrets, patched together from spare parts and rerouted power, opened fire in a burst pattern that no targeting computer could have predicted, because it was not a pattern at all. It was simply whatever the tangled, mismatched systems could manage in that moment, uneven, unpredictable, and devastating at close range. One of the flanking Skarn scouts took 3 direct hits before its own shields could even fully cycle up, its hull cracking open in a burst of white fire. The second flanking ship broke off hard, shocked by the sudden resistance from a direction its sensors had told it was undefended. It was too slow. Priya Nair, calm and precise, guided the dorsal and ventral turrets into a crossing fire pattern that caught the fleeing scout broadside, tearing through its weakened shields and leaving it dead in space, drifting and dark. The third Skarn ship, still focused on the front shields, suddenly found itself alone. On the bridge, Elena watched its formation break as it realized what had happened to the other two. It's retreating, Captain, Nair said. Hyperspace spool-up detected. Let it go, Elena said. It has a story to tell now. Let's see who believes it. The last Skarn scout vanished into hyperspace, leaving one destroyed ship and one drifting, disabled wreck behind. On the Grendel's bridge, there was a moment of stunned silence before Ensign Illich let out a whoop of pure relief and joy, quickly echoed by a ripple of cheers across the bridge crew. Elena did not celebrate yet. She turned to the comm station. Illich, signal the Threll cruisers. Tell them the threat to Ostran 4 has been neutralized, and send a full sensor log of the engagement to Admiral Corrin's flagship. Aye, Captain, Illich said, still grinning as he worked. Down in engineering, Marcus Reyes leaned against a console, breathing hard, sweat soaking through his jumpsuit. Around him, his crew were doing the same, exhausted from the frantic work of holding the reactors together through the brief but intense engagement. We held, said one of his junior engineers, a young woman named Chen, disbelief plain on her face. The old girl actually held. Reyes managed a tired laugh. Told you, stubborn old dog. His comm crackled. Chief Reyes, Elena's voice came through. Good work down there. The ship performed beautifully. She performed like a ship held together with tape and prayer, Captain, Reyes said, but yeah. She held. 6 hours later, Elena stood again in a very different kind of meeting, though this time it was over a secure comm channel rather than in person. Admiral Corrin's image flickered on her bridge view screen, his expression harder to read than before, something between surprise and reluctant respect. I have reviewed your sensor logs, Captain Voss, Corrin said. Your engagement tactics were unconventional. We work with what we have, Admiral, Elena said. Yes, Corrin said slowly. I am beginning to see that. He paused. The disabled Skarn vessel you left drifting has been recovered by our salvage teams. Its logs and interrogation of the surviving crew confirm this was a probing action, testing our defenses ahead of a larger operation. Whatever plans the Skarn commander in this region had, they now know that this sector's defenses include a ship that does not behave as expected. That may buy us time, or it may draw more attention. He studied her for a moment. I am reassigning the Grendel to a forward position, Captain. If your ship can do what it did today, I would rather have it where it can do the most good. Understood, Admiral, Elena said, keeping the surprise out of her voice. The channel closed, and for a moment the bridge was quiet. Forward position, Nair said, a small, satisfied smile on her face. Not bad for a rearguard ship, Captain. We're not done yet, Elena said, looking out at the stars, at the dark edge of the sector, where more Skarn ships were surely already turning their attention. That was 3 scouts. If the Skarn commander in this region is smart, and word is already spreading of what happened here today, next time they won't send scouts. She was right, though not even she yet understood how quickly, or how far, word of the broken human dreadnought would spread. Somewhere out past the edge of Ostrin's sector, a Skarn communications officer was already transmitting a report up the chain of command, describing a ship that fired in patterns no one could predict, that turned an ambush inside out, that looked wounded and helpless, and was neither. The report would travel through Skarn space over the following days, retold and exaggerated with each retelling, until the ship in the story was no longer simply an old, damaged dreadnought. It was becoming something else. Something the Skarn, and soon the rest of the galaxy, would start calling by a different name entirely. 2 weeks after the battle near Ostrin 4, the Grendel had a new reputation, though not everyone on board was happy about it. It started with the Osek. Word had spread quickly through the mining colony about the strange gray ship that had appeared out of nowhere to save them, its weapons firing in odd, uneven bursts that had confused and destroyed 2 Skarn raiders in minutes. The Osek, who valued good stories almost as much as good mining contracts, began calling the Grendel by a new name in their own trade language, a word that translated roughly to the wounded thing that bites back. Other species picked it up and simplified it. By the time the story had traveled through 3 more systems, most people in Ostrin's sector were simply calling the Grendel the monster. I don't love it, Ensign Illich admitted one evening in the mess hall, poking at his food. Monster. Makes us sound like the bad guys. It makes us sound like something the Skarn should be afraid of, Lieutenant Nair said, sitting across from him. I can live with that. Dr. Osei, sitting nearby, gave a small, tired smile. Better a monster the enemy fears than a broken ship the enemy pities. I remember what it was like, right after the accident, watching the reports call us a failure. This is better. Elena, standing near the doorway with a datapad in hand, said nothing, but she agreed. A name was just a name. What mattered was that the sector's defense fleet had started treating the Grendel differently. Ships that had once kept a careful, polite distance now flew in closer formation with her. Admiral Corrin's staff had begun requesting the Grendel's sensor logs after every patrol, studying the strange, unpredictable data patterns her damaged systems produced, trying to understand why they worked so well. But not everyone was pleased by the attention. 3 days later, Elena was called to a private meeting aboard Admiral Corrin's flagship, the Threll cruiser Silver Dawn. She expected another round of praise, or perhaps new orders. What she found instead was a room full of tension. Ambassador Solen was there, along with 2 Concord military observers Elena had not met before, both Vantu, quiet and watchful. Admiral Corrin looked uncomfortable, standing near the window instead of sitting at the table. Captain Voss, Solen said, her voice carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. We have some concerns to discuss. Concerns, Elena repeated. Your ship's recent engagement has drawn a great deal of attention, Solen said. Not all of it welcome. Concord Intelligence has intercepted Skarn communications discussing the Grendel by name. They are treating your ship as a priority target, Captain, a symbol to be destroyed, both for military reasons and to disprove rumors spreading among their own ranks that Earth has developed some new, unpredictable weapon technology. That's not entirely wrong, Elena said carefully. Our systems are unpredictable, that's the point. It is also dangerous, Solen said. Captain, understand my position. I do not doubt your crew's courage or skill, but I have a duty to consider the safety of the entire sector, not just one ship's reputation. If the Skarn commit greater forces specifically to destroy the Grendel, they may use the opportunity to strike elsewhere in the sector, while our attention is focused on defending you. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice level. Are you suggesting we withdraw? I am suggesting caution, Solen said. Perhaps a return to a rearguard position, until the Skarn's attention shifts elsewhere. Admiral Corrin finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Ambassador, with respect, I disagree. The Grendel's presence has done more to slow Skarn incursions in this sector in 2 weeks than our combined fleet managed in the previous 6 months. Retreating now would only confirm to the Skarn that their intimidation tactics work. It would also, I suspect, do little to actually protect this sector, since Skarn probing actions have already spread across multiple systems, not just wherever the Grendel happens to be stationed. One of the Vantu observers finally spoke, her voice slow and thoughtful. The Admiral raises a fair point. We have also reviewed the tactical data from the Grendel's engagement. Its effectiveness does not appear to be a matter of luck. Chief Engineer Reyes's report on the ship's damaged systems suggests the irregularity itself is the advantage. A predictable ship, however powerful, can be countered by a patient enemy. An unpredictable one is far harder to plan against. Solène was quiet for a long moment, clearly unconvinced, but unwilling to argue further against both the Admiral and a Concord observer. Very well, she said finally. The Grendel remains on forward assignment, but Captain Voss, I ask that you exercise caution. Your ship is a symbol now, whether you intended that or not. Symbols draw fire. Understood, Ambassador, Elena said. The warning proved true faster than anyone expected. 9 days later, Concord long-range sensors detected a significant Skarn fleet movement, far larger than any single raiding party the sector had faced before, gathering just beyond the edge of Austrian space. Admiral Korin called an emergency briefing, and this time, every captain in the sector's defense fleet attended, human and alien alike, crowded into the Silver Dawn's main strategy room. 23 confirmed Skarn warships, Korin said, gesturing to the holographic display. Including at least 2 heavy cruisers, and what our analysts believe is a command vessel, based on its size and escort pattern. This is not a probing action. This is a punitive strike force. Punitive, Ambassador Solène repeated, standing near the back of the room. Against whom? Korin's expression was grim. Our intelligence suggests the Skarn commander leading this force, a warlord known in their fleet records as Vashek Thurn, has specifically requested this mission after the loss of his scout ships 2 weeks ago. He has made certain claims to his superiors regarding the destruction of the human vessel responsible. Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. He's coming for the Grendel, she said quietly. He is coming for this entire sector, Korin corrected. But yes, Captain, intelligence suggests the destruction of your ship specifically is a stated objective of this operation, both for strategic reasons and, we believe, to restore Warlord Thurn's reputation among his own people. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Ambassador Solène's eyes found Elena's, and there was no triumph in them, only worry. Captain Voss, Korin continued, I want to be clear. No one in this room expects the Grendel to face this force alone. Our combined fleet will meet Thurn's forces at the edge of the system, at the Kessa belt, where the asteroid field will limit their approach vectors and give our smaller ships room to maneuver. Your ship will be part of that combined defense, not its sole target. Understood, Admiral, Elena said. When do we expect contact? 6 days, Korin said, perhaps less. The next 6 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus Reyes barely slept, moving between engineering stations with a datapad permanently attached to his hand, coaxing every last bit of reliability out of the Grendel's damaged systems. He and his team welded new reinforcement plating across the weakest sections of the hull, salvaged from a decommissioned OSSEC freighter that Korin had authorized for parts. They rerouted power conduits again and again, testing new configurations, trying to squeeze a little more reliable output from Reactor 3, without pushing it past the point of failure. Lieutenant Nair spent hours running combat simulations with the bridge crew, drilling them on every possible formation Thurn's fleet might use, though she readily admitted that predicting Skarn tactics against an opponent as unusual as the Grendel was mostly guesswork. Dr. Osei quietly stocked extra medical supplies and reorganized the ship's makeshift triage areas, remembering all too well what the ship had looked like after the Titan Belt accident, and determined that this time, if the worst happened, her team would be ready. Elena spent much of that time on the bridge, but she also made a point of walking the decks each evening, talking to her crew, most of them barely out of training, all of them now facing the largest battle of their young careers. She found Ensign Illich in the communications room, late on the 5th night, staring at a blank display. Trouble sleeping? She asked. A little, Illich admitted. I keep thinking about what the ambassador said, about us being a symbol. About drawing fire, he looked up at her. Are we going to be okay, Captain? Elena considered lying, offering some easy reassurance. She decided against it. I don't know, she said honestly. I know this ship is stronger than anyone outside this crew believes. I know you, and Nair, and Reyes, and every single person on this ship have worked harder than anyone had a right to ask, to keep her flying and keep her fighting. But I won't tell you there's no risk in what's coming. There is. A big one. Illich nodded slowly, absorbing that. But I'll tell you what I do know, Elena continued. 6 months ago, most of Fleet Command thought this ship was worthless. 2 weeks ago, half this sector thought the same thing. They were wrong before. I intend to make sure they stay wrong. A small, nervous smile crossed Illich's face. The monster fights back. The monster fights back, Elena agreed. On the 6th day, Skarn warlord Vashek Thurn's fleet dropped out of hyperspace, at the edge of Ostran sector. 23 warships arranged in a wide, aggressive formation, their black hulls catching the distant light of the system's star. Aboard his command vessel, Thurn studied the sensor reports from his bridge, his sharp, angular face unreadable to his crew. The human vessel, he said, his voice low and controlled. Confirm its position. Forward position. Alongside the Concord defense fleet at the Kessa Belt, warlord, his tactical officer reported. Thurn's clawed hand tightened slightly on the arm of his command chair. He had heard the reports from his scout squadron, garbled and half disbelieving, of a broken human ship that fought like something twice its strength, that turned careful tactics inside out with nothing but damage and desperation. He did not believe in monsters. He believed in strength, in numbers, in the clean logic of overwhelming force. 23 warships against one broken Dreadnought and its allies. The math, to Thurn, was simple. Advance the fleet, he ordered. Today, we end this story, before it spreads any further. Far ahead, at the edge of the Kessa Belt, the combined Concord defense fleet held position, silver Threll cruisers and sturdy Osek gunships, arranged in careful formation among the drifting asteroids. And at the center of that formation, scarred and patched and utterly unbowed, the UNS Grendel waited, her damaged reactors humming, her mismatched weapons ready, her crew standing at their stations with steady hands and quiet determination. Elena stood on the bridge, watching the enemy fleet grow larger on the display with each passing minute. Aria, she said quietly. Status report. All systems at maximum readiness, Captain, Aria replied, her glitching voice somehow steady despite the tension. We are, as Chief Reyes would say, a mess, but we are a ready mess. Elena allowed herself one small breath, one last moment of stillness before the storm. Then let's give them a fight they'll remember, she said. The Skarn fleet crossed the outer marker of the Kessa Belt at 0642 ship time, 23 warships moving in a wide, confident arc, their sensors sweeping the asteroid field ahead of them. Aboard the Grendel, alarms had already been sounding for 10 minutes, the bridge crew moving through their final preparations with the calm, practiced motions of people who had drilled this moment 100 times in simulation, and knew that no simulation could ever fully prepare them for the real thing. Enemy fleet at extreme range, Lieutenant Nair reported. Formation is aggressive, widespread, clearly meant to prevent us from concentrating fire on any single group. Their command vessel is holding well back, center rear, heavily escorted. Thurn's playing it smart, Elena said, studying the display. He's learned from the scouts. He's not going to let any part of his fleet get isolated, the way those 3 ships did. Combined fleet is holding position at the belt's edge, Captain, Nair continued. Admiral Corrin's signaling all ships to use the asteroid field for cover and to break up enemy formations as they approach. Good, Elena said. Aria, what's our reactor status? Reactor 3 at 71%, and climbing under Chief Reyes's latest adjustments, Aria reported. Reactor 2 remains offline. We are operating at approximately 60% of our original designed combat capacity, Captain, though as previously noted, our unpredictable output patterns may continue to provide a tactical advantage against standard targeting systems. Let's hope Thurn's fleet hasn't found a way around that yet, Elena murmured. She would not have to wait long to find out. The Skarn fleet entered effective combat range 20 minutes later, and the battle at the Kessa Belt began in a storm of light and fire. Threll cruisers darted between asteroids, using the belt's cover to break enemy targeting locks, their sleek hulls weaving through narrow gaps that larger Skarn warships could not follow. Osek gunships worked in tight, coordinated packs, striking at isolated enemy vessels and retreating before return fire could find them. The Grendel held a central position near a cluster of larger asteroids, using their mass to shield her more vulnerable sections, while her forward turrets opened fire on the approaching Skarn line. True to Reyes's predictions, her uneven, patched-together weapon systems fired in irregular bursts that Skarn targeting computers struggled to track, scoring hits even as return fire from the enemy repeatedly missed by narrow margins, thrown off by a firing pattern their systems had never encountered before. Direct hit on Skarn Cruiser Designation 7, Nair called out. Shields down to 40% on that vessel. Keep the pressure on, Elena said. Arya, redirect power from non-essential systems. Boost Turret 2 and Turret 5. They're getting the best hit ratio right now. Redirecting, Captain, Arya confirmed. For nearly an hour, the battle raged in a chaotic dance across the asteroid field, no clear advantage to either side. The Concorde fleet's smaller, faster ships used the belt's cover to strike and retreat, whittling down Skarn numbers slowly, while the Grendel's strange, patched systems continued to confuse and disrupt enemy targeting wherever she engaged. But Thurn's fleet had numbers, and numbers, over time, began to tell. Captain, Nair said, worry creeping into her voice. The Osek gunship squadron, the one covering our starboard flank. They're taking heavy losses. 3 ships down in the last 2 minutes. Elena studied the display. Thurn had adjusted his tactics, concentrating a group of 6 warships against the weaker, lighter-armed Osek vessels, overwhelming them with sheer firepower, despite their maneuverability. They're going to break through, Elena said. If that flank collapses, they'll be able to encircle the rest of the fleet. Orders, Captain? Nair asked. Elena did not hesitate. Helm, move us to intercept. Full power to forward shields. We're going to give those gunships room to fall back. Captain, that puts us directly in the path of 6 enemy warships, Nair said. I'm aware, Elena said. That's the idea. Petty Officer Cole guided the Grendel forward, her massive gray hull cutting between the retreating Osek gunships and the pursuing Skarn warships, putting herself directly in the enemy's path. The 6 Skarn ships, expecting to sweep aside a handful of small damaged gunships, suddenly found their way blocked by 2 kilometers of scarred human Dreadnought. They're redirecting fire, Captain, Nair reported. All 6 ships, concentrating on us. Divert everything to forward shields, Elena ordered. Arya, give me options. Forward shields can sustain concentrated fire from 6 vessels for approximately 90 seconds before failure, Captain, Arya reported. I recommend an alternative strategy. I'm listening. Chief Reyes's recent modifications to Reactor 3 include an emergency overload capacity, originally intended only as a last resort self-destruct failsafe, Arya said. If channeled instead through the ship's remaining weapon systems in a single coordinated burst, it could deliver significantly more firepower than our standard combat output, though at considerable risk to the reactor itself. How much risk? Chief Reyes would need to confirm, Captain, but based on current reactor stress levels, there is a meaningful possibility of catastrophic failure. Elena's jaw tightened. She keyed the comm to engineering. Reyes, I need the truth, fast. Can you give the weapons an overload burst from Reactor 3 without blowing us apart? There was a brief pause, filled with the distant sound of alarms and shouted instructions in the background. Captain, I can try. Reyes's voice came back, tight with strain. I won't lie to you. It's a coin flip. Reactor's already running hotter than I like. But if you need the firepower, I can give it to you. For maybe 15-20 seconds, before I have to cut it, or risk a full breach. Elena looked at the tactical display, at the 6 enemy warships closing in, at her forward shields already beginning to flicker under the sustained assault, at the Osek gunships still limping toward safety behind her. Do it, she said. On my mark. Standing by, Reyes said. The forward shields flared and dimmed under another wave of enemy fire, alarms shrieking across the bridge. Elena watched the shield percentage drop, 28%, 22%, counting down toward failure. Nair, target all 6 ships, spread pattern. Wide as our systems allow, Elena said. Targeting locked, Captain, Nair said. Her voice was steady despite the chaos. Reyes, now. Down in engineering, Marcus Reyes slammed his hand onto the emergency override, rerouting every available watt of power from Reactor 3 directly into the ship's weapon systems. The lights across the entire ship flickered and dimmed as power drained away from every non-essential system, and for one terrifying second, the Grendel went almost dark, running on nothing but the raw, overloaded surge feeding her guns. Then every functioning turret on the Grendel fired at once, in a burst far more powerful than anything her damaged systems should have been able to produce. A wild, chaotic spread of fire that tore through the loose formation of the 6 approaching Skarn warships. 2 ships took direct hits to their already strained shields and were torn apart in bright bursts of destruction. A third staggered, crippled, drifting out of the fight entirely. The remaining 3 broke formation instantly, scattering in confusion, their captains unwilling to face whatever weapon had just devastated half their group in a single, impossible strike. On the bridge, the lights flickered back on as Reyes cut the overload feed just before the reactor's stress levels crossed into true danger. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Elena kept her focus locked on the display, watching the scattered remnants of the enemy group regroup at a cautious distance. "Shield status," she called. "Forward shields at 9%, Captain. But holding," Nair reported. The Ossex squadron made it clear. "They're regrouping with the main fleet." "Reactor status?" "Reactor 3 is stable but critically stressed," Arya reported. "I would strongly advise against another overload burst in the near future, Captain, unless absolutely necessary." "Noted," Elena said. "Let's hope it isn't." Across the battlefield, aboard his command vessel, Warlord Vashek Thurn watched the reports of his 6-ship strike group's destruction, with a stillness that unsettled even his most senior officers. He had personally selected those ships and their commanders, confident that overwhelming numbers would finally silence the stories about the broken human ship once and for all. Instead, in less than 30 seconds, half that group had been destroyed by a single, seemingly impossible weapon discharge. "Explain this," Thurn said quietly, his voice dangerously calm. "Warlord, our sensor logs show a massive, uncoordinated power discharge from the human vessel, immediately preceding the attack," his tactical officer reported, clearly nervous. "It does not match any known weapon signature in our databases. It is possible the ship overloaded its own reactor systems to produce that level of output. A ship willing to risk its own destruction rather than lose," Thurn said slowly. He had fought many battles, against many species, in his long career. He understood fear, understood caution, understood the careful logic of self-preservation that guided most rational commanders. This was something else. "Redirect the main assault force," Thurn ordered finally. "I want that ship isolated and destroyed, before it can attempt anything like that again. All remaining warships, converge on its position, immediately." Across the battlefield, 16 remaining Skarn warships began turning toward the Grendel's position, abandoning their scattered engagements with the rest of the Concord fleet to focus everything on a single target. On the Grendel's bridge, Nair's voice was tight with alarm as she read the new sensor data. "Captain, the entire remaining enemy fleet is converging on us. 16 ships, all vectors." Elena felt a cold weight settle in her stomach as she looked at the display, at the overwhelming wave of enemy warships now bearing down on her already damaged, exhausted ship. "Arya," she said quietly. "Options." There was a pause, longer than usual, before Arya's glitching voice responded. "Captain, I am running every tactical simulation available to me. I must be honest. Our current probability of successfully repelling a concentrated assault from 16 warships, given our present reactor stress levels and remaining weapon capacity, is low." "How low?" "Very low, Captain." Elena stood in the center of her wounded ship's bridge, watching the storm of enemy warships closing in from every direction, her crew's eyes on her, waiting for orders, waiting for some plan, some answer. She had one more idea. It was a desperate one. But desperate had gotten this ship and this crew through, worse than this before. "Nair," she said, "signal Admiral Corrin. Tell him I need the rest of the fleet to converge on our position, fastest vector possible. And tell Chief Reyes I need to know exactly how much more this ship has left to give." Because whatever happened next, Elena was not going to let the Grendel go down without giving Thurn's fleet a fight they would never forget. 16 Skarn warships closed in on the Grendel from every direction, a wall of black hulls tightening around a single wounded gray dreadnought. On the bridge, Elena watched the tactical display with a steady, focused calm, even as every instinct in her told her how bad the numbers looked. "Chief Reyes," she said into the comm, "talk to me. Reactor 3 is stable, Captain, but I meant it when I said no more overload bursts." Reyes's voice came back, strained but clear. "One more stunt like that last one, and we risk a full containment failure. I'm not losing this crew to the same accident that already took 11 of them." "Understood," Elena said. "What can you give me that won't kill us?" There was a pause. "Give me 2 minutes," Reyes said. "I've got an idea. It's not pretty, but it might work." "You have 90 seconds, Elena said, watching the approaching enemy formation. "Make it count." While Reyes worked, Elena turned to Nair. "Talk to me about the asteroid field. What have we got?" Nair pulled up a detailed map of the Kessa Belt's dense central cluster, a region even the smaller, more maneuverable Threll and Ossex ships had avoided during the battle so far, the rocks packed too closely together for safe navigation at combat speed. "It's tight, Captain. Real tight. Most ships wouldn't risk it, not at speed, not under fire. But we could," Elena said, an idea forming. "It would be dangerous," Nair said. "One wrong move, and we don't need the Skarn to finish us." 16 warships are already trying to finish us, Elena said. "I'd rather take my chances against rocks than against that." She turned to Cole at the helm. "Take us into the cluster. Best speed you can manage without killing us against an asteroid." "Aye, Captain," Cole said, sweat beading on his forehead, as his hands moved across the controls. The Grendel banked hard, her damaged engines groaning under the strain, and plunged into the dense heart of the asteroid cluster, weaving between massive drifting rocks with a precision that should have been impossible for a ship her size, especially one running on patched, unreliable systems. Behind her, the pursuing Skarn warships hesitated at the cluster's edge, their larger, more rigid formations unable to follow at the same reckless pace. "They're breaking formation to follow us in, Captain," Nair reported. "But they're slowing down. They don't like the risk." "Good," Elena said. "Let's make them regret following anyway." Down in engineering, Marcus Reyes had gathered his idea into something almost like a plan. "Listen up," he said to his exhausted crew. "We can't overload the reactor again, not without real risk of breach. But we've got backup power cells scattered across every damaged section of this ship, left over from repairs, half-charged emergency systems, stuff nobody ever bothered stripping out because it wasn't worth the trouble. If we link them all together manually, right now, we can feed a short burst to the point defense grid and the remaining turrets. It won't be as big as the last burst, but it'll be enough to surprise them again, and it won't risk the main reactor." "How long to set up?" Chen asked, already moving Taus to nearby console. "However long it takes," Reyes said, "so let's move." His team scattered through the ship's damaged lower decks, manually connecting salvaged power cells to the weapon grid by hand, crawling through narrow, scorched maintenance corridors that the ship's automated systems could no longer reach safely. It was slow, dangerous, exhausting work, made harder by the shuddering impacts of near misses from asteroid debris and distant enemy fire. On the bridge, Elena watched as 3 Skarn warships, bolder or more reckless than the rest, pushed into the asteroid cluster after the Grendel, their weapons firing wildly in an attempt to corner their target among the tumbling rocks. "Enemy vessels closing from the rear, Captain," Nair reported. "They're gaining." "Reyes," Elena said into the comm, "please tell me you've got something." "Almost there, Captain." Reyes's voice came back, breathless. 30 more seconds." "We don't have 30 seconds, Nair said, watching the enemy ships close the distance rapidly. Elena made a decision. "Cole, hard turn, starboard, now. Put us behind that large asteroid cluster ahead." The Grendel banked sharply, her hull groaning under the stress, swinging behind a massive cluster of drifting rock, just as the pursuing Skarn ships opened fire. The asteroids absorbed the brunt of the attack, shattering into clouds of debris, buying the Grendel precious seconds. "Reyes, now would be a wonderful time," Elena said. "Ready," Reyes shouted. "Point defense and remaining turrets. Full power. Now." The Grendel spun out from behind the asteroid cluster, her weapons firing in a fresh, unpredictable burst, catching the 3 pursuing Skarn ships completely off guard as they emerged from the debris cloud expecting an easy kill. Two of the three took heavy damage, their shields collapsing under the surprise assault, forcing them to break off and retreat deeper into the cluster's outer edge. The third, more heavily armored, pressed the attack, closing to point-blank range. "Collision course, Captain," Nair warned. "That ship isn't slowing down." Elena looked at the display, at the aggressive Skarn cruiser bearing down on them at reckless speed, clearly intent on ramming or closing to boarding range rather than retreat. "Hold your ground," Elena said. "All forward weapons, concentrated fire, everything we've got left." The Grendel's remaining turrets fired everything they had. A desperate, concentrated barrage, aimed directly at the oncoming Skarn cruiser's forward hull. At the last possible moment, the enemy ship's shields failed entirely, and the sustained fire tore through its unprotected hull, breaking the ship apart in a bright flash, just meters from the Grendel's own scarred plating. Debris rained against her hull, alarms shrieking, but she held together, battered but intact. On the bridge, there was a moment of stunned, exhausted silence. "Status," Elena said, her voice hoarse. "We're still here, Captain," Nair said, disbelief plain in her voice. "Remaining enemy ships in the cluster are retreating to regroup with the main force." Outside the asteroid cluster, Warlord Thurn watched the retreat of his forward strike group with a stillness that had turned to something colder, something closer to true anger. 3 more ships lost, this time to a target he had personally ordered isolated and destroyed. "Warlord," his tactical officer said carefully. "Long-range sensors show the rest of the Concord defense fleet converging on our position. Estimated arrival, 4 minutes." Thurn stared at the display for a long moment, at the wounded human ship still holding position within the asteroid cluster, refusing to break, refusing to die. He thought of his career, of every battle he had won through patience and overwhelming force, of the report he would eventually have to send back to Skarn High Command explaining how a single broken enemy vessel had cost him nearly a third of his fleet. "Signal general withdrawal," Thurn said finally, his voice flat. "Warlord," his tactical officer said, startled. "You heard me," Thurn said. "We came to destroy a wounded animal and prove a point. Instead, we have lost 11 ships to it, and in 4 minutes, we will be facing the entire Concord defense fleet at a numerical disadvantage. There is no honor in throwing away what remains of this fleet to stubbornness. We withdraw. We will return, better prepared, when the story of today has been properly studied." The remaining 12 Skarn warships began falling back, spooling up for hyperspace retreat, abandoning the assault on Ostrin sector entirely. On the Grendel's bridge, Elena watched the enemy fleet withdraw with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. "They're leaving," Nair said quietly. "Captain, they're actually leaving." A ragged cheer went up across the bridge, quickly spreading through the ship's comm channels as word reached every deck. Elena allowed herself a long, slow breath, feeling the tension of the last hours finally begin to ease from her shoulders. "Arya," she said, "damage report." "Extensive, Captain," Arya replied, her glitching voice somehow carrying a note of something like pride. "But we are, once again, still flying. I believe the appropriate human phrase is, we held." "We held," Elena agreed. In the days that followed, the story of the battle at the Kessa Belt spread far beyond Ostrin sector. Concord news networks carried footage of the engagement, of a single damaged human dreadnought standing against overwhelming odds and forcing a Skarn warlord's fleet into full retreat. The nickname the OSSEC had given her, the Monster, spread with it, no longer spoken with pity or dismissal, but with something closer to respect, and in Skarn territory, something closer to fear. Admiral Corrin requested a formal commendation for the Grendel and her crew, submitted personally to the Concord Council. Ambassador Solène, to her credit, did not argue against it. Back on Earth, Fleet Command's tone shifted overnight. The ship they had been ready to scrap 8 months earlier was suddenly the subject of urgent repair funding requests, expedited supply shipments, and careful, newly respectful press releases. Marcus Reyes finally got the parts requisitions he had been fighting for since before the mission even began, though he grumbled that it would have been nice to have them before the battle instead of after. Elena stood on the bridge one final time, before the Grendel departed for full repairs at a proper shipyard, looking out at the quiet stars of Ostrin sector, safe for now. "Captain," Nair said, standing beside her, "for what it's worth, I don't think anyone in this sector is going to underestimate this ship again. Maybe not, Elena said. But that's not really what mattered. This ship, this crew, we didn't do any of this to prove a point to anyone else. Then why? Nair asked. Elena thought of the 11 names carved into a small memorial plaque near the Grendel's forward observation deck. Names she still thought of every single day. Because 8 months ago, this ship, and the people who didn't make it off her, deserved better than being written off as a failure. We just wanted the chance to finish what she started. Nair was quiet for a moment. I think she finished it, Captain. Elena looked out at the stars one more time, at the long road still ahead. Repairs, new missions, a galaxy that would never quite look at humanity the same way again after today. No, she said finally, a small, tired smile crossing her face. I don't think she's finished at all. I think she's just getting started. Behind her, deep in the ship's damaged heart, Arya's systems hummed quietly, patched and imperfect but steady, keeping watch over a crew and a ship that the galaxy had once written off as broken, and would now remember, for a very long time, as something far more dangerous than anyone had ever expected. The monster of Ostrand had survived, and the galaxy would be watching to see what she did next.